The 495th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Gus. Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Saturday night, about an hour or so since Carolina traveled 8, 10, now 11 miles down the road to Durham into Cameron Indoor Stadium, and they got waxed 87-70 in a game that wasn't even as close as the final score indicated. And we're here to talk about it. We're here to yell about it. We're here to vent about it. Because for a rivalry game that always delivers, this one did not. And the game was effectively over from the first time out of the game onward. So we'll do what we always do. We'll take a look at the box score. I'll basically summarize Sheber Davis's post-game interview that he had with Jones Angel. We'll give the stat of the game, and then we'll get into our thoughts, takeaways, and the discussion topic. But not a whole lot to say that's positive about this performance because I won't even call it an effort because there frankly wasn't enough effort to call it such tonight. Carolina trailed by as many as 27 in the first half. It was 40-13 at one point. They trailed by as many, I think, as 32 overall in the game. But the first half, they got beat on two runs. Duke had a 16-0 run and an 11-0 run that effectively put the game away, put the margin to where Carolina could not even think about getting back in the game and making it feel like a typical Duke-Carolina game. The Heels committed 14 turnovers. That led to 19 points for Duke. And overall, Duke scored 87 points, all while shooting 53% from the field, 50% from behind the three-point line. Short story short, everything that Carolina had to do well to give themselves a chance, they did not do. And everything that they could not afford to do, they did tenfold, whether it was turnovers, fouls, lack of rebounding, no matter what it was. That's exactly what happened. And I think more so than anything, I think our biggest fear came to life, which was that Duke's size, Duke's length, Duke's versatility was going to overwhelm this small Carolina team. And that's effectively what happened. Duke overwhelmed Carolina. They overwhelmed them from the opening tip all the way to the final horn. And it culminates in probably a loss that Carolina has been building towards. This is now their fourth loss in 5 games, I think is what it is now. And each one there's been slippage. And tonight Carolina goes on the road in the most hostile environment that they have played in all season long, the most hostile environment they'll play in all season long, and they flat out crumbled. And it gives them the most disappointing result so far of this season.
No, it's not the most disappointing result so far of the season. It's the most disappointing result of the Hubert Davis era. It doesn't get worse than this, guys. This is rock bottom, and coming back from this probably doesn't happen. It's over. That's what you should take away from tonight. If you had any hope, it's over. This team is not making the tournament. Hubert Davis is not going to turn this around, because this is an issue that unless he ends up fixing the way that he coaches, it's not going to change. Yes, the effort wasn't there from Carolina, but this was just an overall poor coaching job from your head coach, never wanting to make adjustments, trying to be stubborn. You've said it so many times. Dude, you are not Roy Williams. You're not Dean Smith. You can't be this stubborn. Hell, you're not even Bill Guthridge. You are not allowed to be that stubborn to where we're going to run whatever we normally run, and it's going to be effective. It hasn't been effective all damn year. And you thought that it was going to be effective in this game. And then when it doesn't work and you allow a 16-0 run, you never once decide to bring pressure, a full court pressure look. You wait until the second half to say, yeah, we'll start running that then. Doesn't make any sense to me. And it's why Carolina's where they're at. This is one of the most pathetic performances we have ever seen this program put forward. And that really says a lot, because we have seen some really pathetic efforts from this team in recent years. And I could not believe that it happened in this game. We have not seen this bad of a performance in this game since 2010. And in 2010, it was very simple. Carolina wasn't talented enough. I don't buy that with this roster. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. And I get it, man. This team needs a big. This team could use someone on the wing that can make shots and can defend at a high level consistently, game in, game out. This team needs guys that can, frankly, shoot the ball. But at the same time, they may need a coach, because what you saw out there tonight is not good enough. It's just not. And I hate that I've gotten to this point, but, I mean, this is the most embarrassed I think I've ever felt being a Tar Heel basketball fan. And that really says a lot, because this Duke team is good. They are not that good. Not where you should be rolling over in the first half and saying that the game is over. Guys slumping their shoulders and looking like, well, frankly, there's just nothing we can do at this point. I mean, you literally got bent over tonight, guys. Seriously, look in the mirror and just think about the fact that this team came in and destroyed you from the word go, and you had absolutely no response. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I think the one credit you have to give him is he called a timeout when it was 15-6. We didn't even get to the actual media timeout, and the game was already over. Hubert had to call the timeout, which, I've come around on the idea of I want him to call timeouts. As a Roy Williams fan, don't believe in it. I don't agree with it. You get 8 free ones a game, but this team needs it. And he called the timeout. But out of the timeout, I would have thought we would have seen something different. You would have seen a full court press. You would have seen just something that could have gotten you to find your footing. And that simply did not happen. They, for all intents and purposes, they quit after a possession where Duke grabbed 3 offensive rebounds and hit a 3. And it was like that one possession took all their competitive fight out of them.
Which doesn't make sense. By the way, because did you not think coming in that team with the size that they had were going to be able to pull down offensive rebounds? That's the reason that you quit? It doesn't make that doesn't make any sense. You knew this team was bigger than you, and you sat there and took it. Like, what kind of mindset is that for this team, man? And again, it goes back to what we've talked about this whole year. This team has no leadership. Not from the head coach and not from the guys on the floor, which is just pathetic. There are guys that have been here for how many years? Like, dude, RJ, I love you. But seriously, dude, that's what happens. This is the game where you choose, oh, well, we're just going to lay over and take it. That's on your legacy. You had a chance to be the second guy, well, the second main star. There were a few other guys that did it as well that were on that 2009 championship team. You had a chance to be one of those guys that won 4 times in Cameron. And this is the performance that you put forward. You don't show any sort of leadership during this type of game. Come on, man. Does anyone have pride on this team? Anybody?
Well, I think that's what really is disappointing. What makes this game universally great is that it brings out the best in both teams. Brings out the best. And I think the hope was that Carolina was going to meet the moment and that they were going to rise to the challenge and play their most competitive game of the season. Like, man, if Carolina loses in typical Carolina Duke fashion, where the game goes down to the final possession or two, it hurts more, but at least we could say something positive. There's something to build off of. What's there to build off of after tonight? What do you look at and say,
Nothing.
I feel confident about this moving forward. I feel confident about that moving forward. I mean, you can look at what Drake Powell did the last 6 minutes of the game. We were down 30. Like, Duke took their foot off the gas. And John Shire was so pissed off about it, he called a timeout because he didn't like the way his team was closing out a blowout victory over their biggest rival. And so leadership on the court is a problem. Leadership on the bench is a bigger problem. Like, how in God's name do you allow, I think Roger Ayers was the lead official tonight. I think that was the guy calling the game. Roger Ayers, good official. I'll leave it at that. But the one time that our bench wants to get up and show some fight and show some animation and question a call, they get issued a warning. And instead of fighting for your guys, instead of having your guys' back, all of our guys sit there, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. But that's the culture. That's the environment that has been cultivated. In his entire 36 years as Carolina's head coach, a lot of people thought the reason why Carolina did not win enough national titles under Dean Smith was that they were not tough enough. They were not tough enough to win the type of games that the talent should suggest that you win. I don't think that was said as frequently as under Roy Williams. Maybe it was. In my lifetime, I never really got the feeling. You can look at Carolina. You can look at Carolina under Hubert Davis, and they're soft. Like, I mean, I got told at work multiple times, well, you're 13-9 because you don't have a big man. Guys, Armando Baycott's not solving what happened tonight on the court. Tyler Zeller is not solving what happened tonight on the court. Tyler Hansbrough, the best big man to ever play in the conference, the best player to ever play in the ACC, is not solving what happened tonight on the basketball court. There are bigger issues than just roster construction as to why you went 8 miles down the road and you got embarrassed. You got ran out of the gym. Dude, you got your ass kicked so bad that Coach K didn't even watch the whole 40-minute game. He actually left with 52 seconds left to go.
What was to stay around for? The result was final already, which is a joke.
Like, I mean, how many times have you we've watched a Carolina Duke game, whether it's us blowing them out or them blowing us out, and you're seeing legendary figures leave the game. Like, I've never once seen that in my life. Give Dan Shulman, Jay Billis, give them a ton of job broadcasting the game the way that they did. Because by the under 12-minute timeout, they could have started talking about anything other than what was going on in front of them, and it would have been justified.
To be fair, they did eventually start with the promos for the Arkansas-Kentucky game, which, by the way, is more exciting. Literally, there was a game on during your time slot between Houston and Texas Tech that will be more memorable than this game. Let that sink in. Let that sink in how pathetic you look tonight. It's a joke.
It's another example of tonight was the clearest example of what we've talked about after the Pittsburgh game, which was the regression. There's no denying that Carolina basketball is not what Carolina basketball was.
Yep.
It's not where Carolina basketball is supposed to be. And sometimes what sucks is sometimes you need a loss like this to really get you back to where you want to be. Sometimes you need to be humbled and you need to be embarrassed. And if that's not the feeling that's coming out of that locker room, if that's not the feeling that's coming out from our athletic administration, then that's an even bigger issue, man. We're going to lose to them. That's part of it. We've lost to them 118 times. Should we be down 27 to them in the first half? Should we be down 32 to them in the second half? No, we should not. They're not we did not play the immortals. They're not gods. They're basketball players. And a lot of them are younger than you. A lot of them have never played in that environment, in that setting. Something that I thought was our advantage.
Yep.
I thought having played in that rivalry as many times as RJ Davis has, as now Seth Trimble has. I mean, Elliot Cadeau, it's only his third game. That's 3 more than Cooper Flax played in. I thought all of that stuff would have benefited Carolina. It did not. And instead, it felt like Carolina was the team overwhelmed by the energy. Carolina was the team overwhelmed by the emotion. And then we just talk about the game plan. I don't know what semblance of offense Carolina tried to run in that first half. I mean, he was trying to use his guards in some cross screens and some pin down screens to try to get someone open, but you're still getting that someone open 35 feet away from the basket. You ain't getting nothing accomplished that way. The lack of let's full court press and just try to get the game sped up. Let's try to maybe get them to commit a turnover or two. That wasn't present. That wasn't evident. John Shire's a good coach. I don't think John Shire should be out coaching, out preparing, out executing Hubert Davis the way that he did tonight. But that's just a microcosm of Carolina got out everything. Everything. They got out toughed. They got out hearted. They got out cared. They got out coached. I mean, any action, if you want to put behind the word out, it was it. That was evident. And I just, how does that happen in this game, in this setting? Knowing that if you win this game, if you just win it, doesn't matter how it looks, doesn't matter none. If you just win, it literally erases all the negative crap that has been said about you the first 3 months. And instead, you go out there, you get blown out, you don't try to fight back, you don't try to do anything. So instead, guys like you and me that have a platform on a podcast, guys like you and me that have a platform on a radio station are just going to pile on and have a week to continue to pile on. And frankly, that's what they deserve. They have earned the right to be talked about in a negative way. Because 13-10 is not good enough here. 6-5 in the conference is not good enough here. Getting blown out by Duke is not good enough here. And that's the reality of the situation. That's the reality of North Carolina basketball in 2024, 2025.
Yep, that's where we've gotten to, and it is incredibly sad. And the thing is that you're on the brink of losing the fan base. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I mean, this team after tonight, how do you believe in any game for this team down the stretch of the season? Like, point me to a game that you believe Carolina is actually going to win. Maybe Miami, because the way you look tonight, you're not going to be able to compete with any ACC team. Look at the teams that competed with Duke recently. that actually gave them a legitimate game. And I get it. You had to go into their place. But still, man, that was just a pathetic effort all around. And look, is it all on the coaching? No. Of course it's not all on the coaching. But this is as out on Hubert Davis as I've ever been. Like, if they made the move based off of this game, how could you care? How could you say to yourself, I don't think that's the right move? You would say it's justified because this team basically seemed to lose its way in this game. The first time they faced any sort of adversity, they crumbled. There was no response. There's no adjustments to the game. I mean, you brought up, offensively, what are you doing on the offensive end of the floor, creativity-wise? There's nothing. They don't seem to be running any sort of specific plays that involve any way to free guys up. It seems you talked about some of the screens that they were running with the guards, but it doesn't matter. It's not working. You've got to get more creative. Do you not have anybody on this coaching staff that knows how to draw up plays? There are supposed to be guys. I mean, I thought that was what Jeff Lebo was supposed to be brought here to do. Well, if he can't get the job done, then you need to be looking elsewhere. You need to be looking for someone else that can come to your bench and help you out. That's where a guy like Steve Robinson would be great. But you didn't want him on your staff. You said that you wanted Carolina-only guys. So, I mean, that end of the floor is just a disaster. You turn the ball over so much on that end of the floor. And this was a great point. This was something Hubert brought up in his postgame as well. But it was brought up on the broadcast, and everybody knows this at this point. Man, every turnover this Carolina team commits is a live ball turnover, which means that it's turning into points on the other end of the floor. I mean, damn, if you're going to turn the ball over, at least throw the ball out of bounds and give yourself a chance to set up defensively. Give yourself a chance to press if you actually want to. And that's the thing. You could say, well, why didn't Hubert press during the 16-0 run? There were no stoppages. But the rest of the night, it doesn't make any sense how you didn't press. That's what doesn't make sense to me. Why you waited so long when you started making baskets in the first half. You started making baskets early in the second half, and you still chose not to press. What are you doing? You go to a zone. It doesn't work. It leads to one basket. You bail on the zone. Then you tell us in the postgame, oh, yeah, we're going to go to more zone moving forward. Really? Because the last time you told us we were going to start doing something more often, you told us we were going to start full court pressing. It's not happening. So I can't believe anything that he tells us at this point. And that's a sad place to be at with your head coach. I mean, I know, we in terms of saying whether or not he's going to be let go, man, we got plenty of time to be able to do that. But this game is damning for that argument from people that he should be on the hot seat this year as opposed to waiting until next year. Because when you get embarrassed like that, your team shows no emotion. Man, it's a bad reflection on you. And, I mean, you pointed it out that there wasn't a lot of emotion that he was coaching with. The thing that is very noticeable now, that we've gone through it for a second time, when he realizes that he has a team that is very flawed, that he has a team that is going to struggle at points during the season, he can't handle that as a coach. He sags his shoulders and he gets down on himself. And that's, unfortunately, I don't know if that's something that can be changed within him. That's a confidence issue.
Well, I think it's more you just watch a grown man pout. That's what I call it.
Yep.
Because he stands there with his arms crossed, and that's what you get. A lot of what you see on the court, in my opinion, at the college level reflects what is being cultivated by your coaching staff. And the simple truth of the matter is that in year 4, Carolina basketball does not have a consistent culture, does not have a consistent identity. And until that changes, the roller coaster we've been on over these last 4 years will not. And, I was of the belief that after last year, I thought after last year he had found his way. He had found his footing. He had found his voice. He had developed a backbone and was going to be what we thought he was going to be when he got hired. That's not the case, guys. And maybe he can still grow into that. But two things have got to change. There's got to be, he needs reinforcement financially. There's got to be a commitment financially that they're going to put the stuff in place that you need to have in place to be a top flight program. And every indication is that is coming. That stuff. Reese Davis said this morning on game day that there are stuff in the works to overhaul Carolina off the court to create a better competitive advantage in this new world of transfer portal, NIL. So we know that is coming. He also has to put a better staff around him. The idea of having all Carolina guys on the bench, great idea. Love the premise of the idea. But when Roy Williams was Carolina's head coach, he typically had the best coaching staff in the country. And that was without having Carolina guys. Now, Steve Robinson, CB McGrath, Gerard Haas, all these guys eventually became Carolina guys.
Yes.
We view them as an extension of the family, but I don't know if Sean May, Jeff Lebo, Brad Frederick, and Marcus Page are the guys that are helping a relatively young head coach be the best version that he can be game in, game out. And unfortunately, man, he is not afforded the same thing that Coach Smith was afforded in the 1960s. Coach Smith was given the time to learn and develop because when he took over the program was on probation. The words he was given from the university were not to embarrass the university. Was never given a mandated on how many games you had to win, how many national titles you had to compete for, how many Final Fours. It's not 1961. It's 2024. And this is a program that the baseline expectation is that you finish top 3 in the ACC and you go to the Sweet 16. We're not coming close to any of that this year. And you haven't come close to that for the reality of it in 3 of the 4 years. Take a look at the box score. Carolina statistically did some things well. I mean, they did shoot 47% from the field. They were 26 of 55, but the problem was Duke shot 53%. Duke was 28 of 53. Carolina shot 37% from behind the three-point line. 7 of 19. Not a bad shooting night for a team that has struggled to shoot the ball well from the outside. Problem was Duke was better. They shot 50%. They were 10 of 20. Carolina, 11 of 14 at the foul line. Problem was Duke was 21 of 25 at the foul line. Big bugaboo was the turnovers, 14 turnovers led to 19 points for Duke. On the flip side, Carolina forced just 8 turnovers. That led to 7 points for Carolina. The Heels actually won the rebounding battle, 31-26 on the overall glass. It was 19-9 on the defensive glass, 12-7 on the offensive glass. But even with Carolina grabbing 5 more offensive rebounds, they were outscored in second chance points, 9-5. Led by Drake Powell, Carolina's bench outscored Duke's bench 25-8. Points in the paint was just 32-30 in favor of Duke. Both teams had 10 fast break points, but a big indication of the struggles. How about 20 Duke assists on 28 made baskets? Carolina, 11 assists on their 26 made baskets. The game was tied one time. All in all, Duke led for 38 minutes and 4 seconds. Carolina failed to hold a lead in the ball game. I said I'd summarize Coach Davis's post-game interview. Of course, I always listen to the Jones Angel one that he does on the Tar Heel Sports Network. And I'll give him credit. He sounds the way he's supposed to sound after a loss. He sounded the way he was supposed to sound after a loss to Duke. He did say, and I think this is something we can talk about, is that you can't expect to see the 2-3 zone more moving forward. He said it's the first time that they've played it all year, which is correct. And it's something that they've been working on in practice, and they've been holding it in their back pocket. I didn't understand why, and this is something that I don't quite understand with him at all. Just because you do something one possession and it works isn't an excuse to change it up on the next possession, or even if you get exposed. Like, I think the first time Carolina played zone, they gave up an offensive rebound and they still gave up a bucket. Okay, that's what a zone is going to do. A zone is going to leave you suspect to giving up offensive rebounds. If you want further proof, go back and watch how Carolina beat Syracuse for the decade that Roy Williams was coaching against Jim Boeheim. It's because Carolina could pound that offensive glass. The difference was that I thought for the most part, it kept their penetration out of the lane. And our defense tonight, the lack of floor integrity was embarrassing. There were multiple possessions where our entire defense was inside, not just the 3-point line. It was inside the foul line.
Yep.
And when the ball got kicked out, even if we closed hard, you're still having to close 10, 15, 20 feet. And Duke's too good to that's not going to affect their shooting so much. So I don't like zone. I hate zone defense. I think it should be abolished like it is in the NBA. But at this point, with as bad as Carolina is at containing the dribble drive, with their lack of rim protection that they have consistently, you're already a mediocre to average rebounding team at best. I'm okay if he plays more zone, because I thought there were times in the second half they executed a lot better than their man-to-man defense that they've been executing all game long.
Yeah, I think that you should see it more often, because here's the thing is that it makes it easier to double as well, because Carolina likes to do that so often. And that's what leads to guys coming down into the paint from the other side of the floor of certain guys. I don't really understand it. I don't understand how you sag that far off of one of the best three-point shooting teams in the entire country. It doesn't make any sense. It's maddening, because we all know the statistics. We know how many threes this team takes. We know how many they make, and they shoot a good percentage. And yet, for some reason, you decided we're going to pack the paint on this team because for some reason we're worried about getting blown by. You know how you don't get blown by? By pressuring the ball a little bit more, even in the half court. Because Carolina, they did that at the middle portion of this season. I mean, dude, that SMU team that you destroyed, that team just beat the hell out of Stanford today and scored the ball at an incredibly high rate. You're capable of doing it, but for some reason, it is not consistent for this group. And so now you've got to go to pulling stunts like running the 2-3 zone. But if you're going to do it, you're right. You've got to do it more than one possession. You can't just give up because it leads to a basket. You've got to stay committed to it. And that's the same thing if you're going to run the full court press at certain times. You have to stick with it. Yes, teams are going to score on you. It's going to happen no matter what you run. The full court press wasn't nearly as effective as we've seen it be other times. This team's talented. But to me, it would have been something different. And that's the thing. If you're trying something different and the results are still the same, well, then guess what? We're not really talking about the coaching. We're saying, hey, Hubert's making all the adjustments, man. This team just ain't that good. And this is the thing that I want to make sure people understand about tonight. We are incredibly frustrated with what we are seeing from Hubert Davis coaching-wise. But the players are the biggest issue with this team. This is a group that right now, as we mentioned, has no leadership, has no cohesiveness, and they are not playing the way that we thought they were going to play coming into the season. They have the talent on this roster. It's there. You've got a guy who is probably going to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft in Ian Jackson. Now, we don't know when that's going to be because he has not played well at all, really, since that Stanford game. It has been a steep drop-off for him. You've got RJ Davis, a guy who came into the year as one of the favorites to be the National Player of the Year. There's a reason that he was that highly thought of. Drake Powell, another guy who will eventually be in the NBA because of the way that he defends, because of the fact that, his game offensively is going to eventually come along. Those guys right there. And then that doesn't even include Elliot Cadeau, who came in we knew when he came in last year, he was as highly touted as any point guard that Carolina's had in a long, long time. So that right there should be enough. That's enough talent right there for you to be able to compete. And for some reason, you couldn't even compete tonight against Duke. That's where it comes down to playing with passion, playing with what does Hubert say? Effort, enthusiasm,
and energy.
And energy. And guess what? You didn't see any of that tonight. The minute that run started, the energy came out, quickly followed by the effort and the enthusiasm. I mean, has it ever really been there this season? I think, honestly, it's safe to ask that at this point. Does this team really get that excited by what happens on the court? It doesn't seem like it. So, yeah, man, we're back where we were a couple of years ago. And I hate to say that. I can't believe that we're at that point. But, I mean, this team, we're staring down a team that is bound for the NIT and maybe not even good enough to make it into that field if they keep going the way they're going.
Stat of the game, I went points off turnovers. Duke was plus 12 in that category. They outscored Carolina 19-7. I also could have just went with the turnovers as the sheer stat of the game. 14's too much in that building. It's too much in just about any building to win, but let alone in that building and that environment. And, this team, you would have thought that some of their comebacks that they've had this year at Kansas on the neutral floors against, Michigan State, against Dayton, against Florida, even though the Michigan State and Florida games were losses, would have maybe had them build to make one tonight. But the fact of the matter is that it's so hard in that building to really pick yourself up once you get down like that, because you got to play twice as hard. Because the game's already at a different level, but it was still not an excuse to basically lie down and quit and get embarrassed like the team did. But that's just the reality of the situation. So more thoughts, more takeaways from Carolina's blowout loss tonight at Duke. They fall 87-70. Carolina now 13-10 on the year, 6-5 in the league. We appreciate all of you that are joining us live, whether you're listening to this on our Heel Tough blog, Facebook or YouTube pages, or at my personal Twitter feed at HTB_Josh. If you're listening to it through the Twitter feed, don't do me a favor, give me a follow. It would be greatly appreciated. So getting back into the loss, man, we knew Cooper Flagg was good. We knew Cooper Flagg is going to be the number one pick in the draft. And the kid lived up to the hype, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists in 38 minutes. I thought what was as disappointing as Carolina's defense on him, and we talked about trying to make the other guys beat you in Knipple and Tyrese Proctor, and you could say that they did. Knipple had 22, Proctor had 17. Man, I thought Carolina got punked by Con Knipple tonight, man. RJ Davis included. I mean, there was one time Knipple took him into the post, turned into him. RJ gets a hand on the ball, and he just shoots right through him and draws a foul. I thought, as poorly as Carolina defended Cooper Flagg, because I thought the initial defense on him was horrendous. I thought that they never made him work for anything. It's like they just kind of gave in to him and his presence and what he was capable of doing. But I thought Carolina's defense on the other two guys was poor. And it was once Proctor, once Knipple saw the ball go in the basket, Their confidence rose to a level that it maybe hasn't been at all year long. They're feeding off the energy. They're feeding off the enthusiasm coming out of the crowd, and it just overwhelmed Carolina's defense. And this is a defense that's been trending in the wrong direction. Since the Boston College game, they dropped 19 spots in KenPom. They entered the KenPom game top 30 in defensive rating. They entered tonight's game 48th overall. I guess my simple question is was there anything different Carolina could have done in the half court to eliminate what Duke was able to do, or was their size, their length, their superior strength and athleticism going to overwhelm Carolina no matter what?
Well, I think it's both. I do think that their size and athleticism was probably going to be too much for Carolina, and we probably should have known that coming into this game. But I also think that you could have done things certainly a lot differently on that end. Again, we talked about how Carolina just seemed to sag off pretty much everybody else. I thought you saw it early in the game. Carolina comes over, attempts to double team Cooper Flagg, allows a wide open look, and it's an easy bucket. And that was, I think, the moment where it showed Carolina was afraid of Cooper Flagg. They were worried about what he was going to do. And, rightfully so. First 15 points of the game, he either scored or assisted on those baskets. But you couldn't be so afraid of him that you just left everybody else wide open. Because we've talked about it here during this stretch, during this 5-game stretch where Carolina's lost 4 out of 5. Man, they have done the thing that they did early in the season, which they have let guys get comfortable in these games. They've let them settle into rhythms. And once you let them settle into a rhythm, it's hard to get out of it. I've heard it from basketball players that have said it, is when you let a guy settle into a groove, when you then try to pick up defensively, and even if you find a way to dig deeper and find a way to be in the vicinity of them and trying to slow them down, it doesn't matter. They're already in rhythm. And I think, again, that's what you saw tonight, because whenever Carolina would then try to make any sort of run, Duke would come back and counter with a big shot from Knipple, a big shot from Tyrese Proctor, or Cooper Flagg. So, look, Carolina's going to have to do things differently in the second matchup. Again, I think the full court press, if there's a game that you need to use it, it's this game. And you don't have to use it the entire game, because if you use it the entire game, things will eventually get figured out. But you need to throw different looks at them. The zone could certainly help with that as well, I think, in terms of, potentially being able to contain the ball a little bit better, but especially taking care of the perimeter at a higher rate. So hopefully Carolina looks into doing some of that for the second matchup, because that's right. You still have to face this team one more time before the season is over.
Hey, look, Carolina did not press tonight until the 14-14 mark in the second half. Newsflash, the game was already over by then.
Yep.
Carolina was down double digits with 13 minutes to go in the first half and waited until the 14-minute mark of the second half to deploy the full court press. And so I think, I was not a fan of the constant double teamed Flag once the ball got into the post.
Yep.
One, we don't double team effectively enough as it is in our half court defense. B, with his size and his length, could see over the defense and pass out of the double team. And the kid's too gifted of a passer. He's good enough to where he can control the game with his passing. And he made every right read, put the ball where the ball was supposed to go, and it left Carolina scrambling like eggs on a Sunday morning.
Nice.
Some other things that really impacted the game, I thought right away. Elliot Cadeau, I think, bad matchup for him. He's small, he's tiny, and quite frankly, he's weak with the basketball. He's careless with the basketball, and whenever they would run a pick and roll, I thought how Duke would blitz it and they would trap it was the right thing to do. And he was trying to make passes that simply were not there to be made. He had 5 turnovers in the game in 26 minutes. I mean that is five. That is five too many. I also did not understand why Jalen Washington, who picked up 2 fouls, I believe before the under 12-minute timeout. I may be wrong. It may be after the under 12, but whatever. Did not play extended minutes in the first half. Because Venal and Lubin decided to play about at the under 4 timeout of the second half. I thought Jalen Washington came in and looked like the Jalen Washington that we've kind of seen here the last month or so, a guy that's been progressing towards being at least a much more consistent player, draws the 2 fouls, and Huber takes him off the floor. But this is a guy that in 14 minutes scored 6 points, was perfect from the field, and grabbed 4 rebounds. I mean, at some point, man, you got to play guys with 2 fouls because you're not deep enough to play your other guys. And I don't understand why James Brown was not given a look in that moment as opposed to Venal and Lubin. Like, it was very evident. Venal and Lubin had nothing for, come on, Malawach. Malawach had 6.6 rebounds in 21 minutes, and he absolutely, you will talk about punking. And he downright bullied Venal and Lubin on the glass tonight.
Yep.
So that was just one to me where I didn't understand. Maybe there was a minutes restriction on Jalen Washington coming off the injury. And if that's the case, then, I mean, it's hard. I guess it'll be hard for us to complain. But that had to be communicated to us going into the game. Because I did not understand. He was the one guy that was giving you something on the back end. I just didn't understand why when he picked up his second foul, we absolutely just abandoned him from the first half. Because by the time he checked back into the game in the second half, no matter what Jalen Washington would have done, the damage was already done, and the lead at that point was already insurmountable.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, I don't understand why anybody else was not given a chance. Whether it's Tyjon Claude, whether it's James Brown. I mean, we talked about it. At some point, you could have just put in the walk-ons. Like, at some point, you have to just say, you know what? You guys are not playing. You guys have not been getting it done. The effort level looks terrible. We need to get somebody else out on the floor just to try to energize them. And I get it, man. We're guys that grew up with Roy. He would do that at times. He would say, look, I'm pissed. You guys are not putting in the effort that I need to see. Luke Davis, get your ass in there. And we would be like, oh, hell yeah. This is how you know Roy is pissed off. I mean, we had a few different guys that Roy would do it with. Stillman White was always our favorite. When he came into the game, if it wasn't because of an injury or it wasn't because of senior night, you knew that Roy was pissed off. And so, I mean, I think and again, it just has to be one guy that you throw out there. I mean, hell, dude, in the first half, I mean, I said coming into the game, we better not see this dude. Why would you not go to Cade Tyson? Just to see if you can get anything, any sort of reaction from anybody to say, okay, Cade's in the game. It's time for us to wake up. This is how you know that there's trouble. But yeah, the Jalen Washington thing was confusing to me. And maybe there is a restriction on him. I mean, look, you don't want to push him too much because that knee injury that he suffered in high school is serious. That's something that if he suffers a serious enough setback, that could be his career. And look, as much as you needed him in this game, you need him the rest of the year. He's one of the few guys right now that's giving you something positive. But you just have to try somebody else because there was no way. Lubin, you knew it early in the game that he was not ready for this matchup and that you were going to need somebody else. And we've seen it, man. You know, Hubert talked about it after Boston College. Well, Tyjon Claude was a guy that really, stirred us back in the right direction. We haven't seen him since. So what are we doing? That's why it doesn't make sense to buy into the fact that they're going to run more zone when he tells you that. Because you talked about how great that was for your team, how that really changed everything. And then you don't even use them in a game like this where Carolina needs somebody that can bring consistent effort. So, I mean, that's just the disappointing part is that you would like to see other guys in a situation like this get an opportunity to prove themselves. But, I mean, that big man spot as a whole, and I know people are saying, well, Carolina ended up out-rebounding Duke. Guys, you want to know why Carolina ended up out-rebounding Duke? One, it's because Duke shot the ball so well in this game that there weren't a ton of rebounds available on the offensive end of the floor. Two, it's because Duke gave up towards the end of the game and stopped playing at the level that they were. If they would have played with the same intensity that they played with early in the game, Carolina would have lost this game by 50. So when you look at that center position and you say, well, this shows this wasn't necessarily a weakness. No, there is a definite weakness there. There is a lack of rim protection consistently, which allows guys to drive the basket with no consequences. When our guys can't stay in front of them, that's the area of the floor. And that's where everything starts, man. When you can't defend, it is hard for your team to feel confident that they can win. And they allowed 87 points tonight. That is the 7th time this season that they have allowed 87 or more points. That's a joke. That's pathetic because this team is supposed to be better defensively. But that's where it shows you that the roster construction is simply not where it needs to be.
Yeah, the fact that that's the 7th time they've given up 87 or more, it's hard to believe that they're gonna stop teams from giving up that many moving forward because there's not a consistent thing this team does well. And as I said after the Boston College game, I think the way that they played in that game is how they got to play, because I think it's their best offensive lineup, but that leaves them suspect on the defensive end of the floor. Drake Powell was a guy that Hubert Davis talked about in his post game. Loved the energy, loved the effort, loved the fight. And I think he gave Carolina, a lift, a boost is a strong word to say in a 17-point defeat in a game that was mainly a 30-point margin the majority of the second half. But 12 points, 5 of 8 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3 in 22 minutes. If there's any bright spot that you take away from this, it's his performance. RJ, 12 points, 4 of 11 shooting, was 2 of 4 from 3 in 30 minutes. He didn't play, though, the last, 6.5 minutes or so of the game. Seth Trimble had 10 points and 5 rebounds in 30 minutes, but committed 2 turnovers, did not make any three-pointer, really struggled to have an impact on the game the way that you expected him to. We just talked about, Ben Allen Lubin and his struggles. Ian Jackson continues to just shoot the ball inefficiently. 8 points, 2 of 6 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. And so I do think if you're trying to find a silver lining, something to be not excited about, but optimistic about, is that Drake Powell had a big game on the road in that environment. And maybe that's something he can build off of going into this next week of practice, because Carolina has a week off. They don't play again until next Saturday. And everything has to be reevaluated. Everything has to be, on the table, if you will. Because we'll kind of quickly move into our discussion topic before we get out of here. I simply wrote, Carolina is now 0-2 since Hubert's post-game passionate plea with his team after the come-from-behind win at Boston College, where he tried to send a message and tried to light a fire, inspire, whatever it is. And his team against Pittsburgh over the last 8 minutes collapsed in a game that they had controlled on the road. And then tonight, in the biggest game of the year, they came out flat from the beginning, and for the second time all year, failed to lead in a ball game. The other one was a loss to Auburn back in the Maui Invitational. So simply put, at 13-10 and 6-5, where does Carolina go from here as they try to pick themselves up off the mat after getting blown out by their biggest rival?
Well, you're at a point where now you have to win your next 2 games. You then have to build off of that and probably win every game up until the Duke game, at least, if you're going to have any chance. I think that, now you do kind of wonder if tonight sort of has an effect, because the tournament committee watched this. They saw how bad of a blowout this was. So now you wonder, does that mean that you also have to get the game at home against Duke? Because, I mean, we're sitting here right now. Man, we can all say it. This team is not a tournament team. I tweeted it out at halftime. This team sucks, man. This is where they are at. So now for them, it's about picking yourself up and literally just reeling off win after win. Because in this conference, you can't suffer another loss. You can't. You just can't do it. You have to find a way to beat Pittsburgh. You have to find a way to win on the road against Clemson. The most important ones are you have to find ways to win on the road against Clemson, and you have to find a way to win at home against Duke. You do that, you might have a chance to go to the tournament. But that also means that you can't lose to a team that just stinks. And I got to be honest, the way this team has played here recently, I don't know if that's possible. That Stanford team, they beat you. They just got absolutely destroyed today by SMU on the road. So, I mean, I just, for this group, I mean, you'd like to think that there's still a chance that they can make the NCAA tournament and turn it around. But the effort that they showed you tonight really shows that that probably isn't possible and that this is just a lost season.
Yeah, my first suggestion for this team and where they need to go is they need to go to church and they need to pray. Because I don't know. At this point, I have lost too much sleep trying to figure out a way to save this year. That I have run out of ideas. There's not something that I can look at and point to and think, well, if we do this better, if we commit to that, if we do this, if he makes this adjustment, if we do this tweak, pivot, alter, whatever it is, those are his words, not mine, then we'll be the type of team that we're capable of being. I think at this point, this is who Carolina is. And you got to hope that behind the scenes, the frustration that you and I are voicing out is being met by the power makers that be within the higher ups of Carolina's athletic department and their university overall to fix this, because this is not okay. This is not acceptable. This is not the standard. But it might be what Carolina basketball is in 2024, 2025. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is where I got to after watching this team play the way they played tonight. RJ should have left and started his venture into pro basketball, because even though Carolina didn't achieve the ultimate prize last year, he still would have left on top, having been the ACC Player of the Year on a team that won an ACC regular season title, was a 1 seed in the tournament, and made the Sweet 16. We could have said, if that was the end of his story, that was the final chapter. Man, it's a positive one in a lot of different ways. This kid comes back to, I do think part of it was, yes, it would be wrong if he didn't admit that he wanted to come back to further write his name into the record books and do the things individually that he's still going to end up doing. But he was motivated to come back to win a national championship, to get back to the stage that he played on as a sophomore, to get back to the Final Four, to maybe defend his ACC Player of the Year award, and maybe be an All-American and a Naismith Player of the Year. Instead, he's come back to be mainly the victim and mainly the villain of the reason why Carolina is as bad as they are right now. We hear it at work, whether it's from host on the station or from listeners to the station. I hear it in my DMs on Twitter that, maybe he should have moved on. And maybe he's part of the reason why Carolina is where it is. I refuse to believe that part of it. I don't think Carolina is 13-10 because of RJ Davis, but I do think, man, maybe he should have moved on and gone to the G League and experienced some of the things that Armando's experiencing, or went overseas and started his journey of a long, lengthy pro career. The kid came back to achieve things for North Carolina. My hope and my prayer is that maybe we do enough to give himself a one final shot to achieve all of those things. It's just hard to believe that that's in the cards for this team. Because if we thought bouncing back from Stanford was going to be hard, bouncing back from getting blown out at Duke's even tougher. From just a mental standpoint, because of how much goes into the game that you don't perform in the game. Luckily, they got a week off to regroup, and maybe what this team needs to do is get away from basketball and take a day or two. Maybe they don't need to do what I hope they do, which is overcompensate, get back in the gym, get back in the film room, and try to figure it the heck out. But I don't know. I'm at as much a loss for words as I've ever been as a Carolina basketball fan. And I never thought we'd be sitting here where we are tonight when the season started. When I had this team going undefeated in the non-con, when I had this team defending an ACC regular season title, when I had RJ Davis experiencing all the things individually that he knew this season could set him up to achieve. But that's not the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is Carolina's 13-10, and they got a lot of work to do to become a team we can be proud of. Because quite simply, that great day to be a Tar Heel is nothing more than an acronym. Because this team is not anything to be proud about. It's not. And I don't know how many times I could look at a Carolina basketball team and say, I'm not proud of the way that they play. But this team has gotten me there. And hopefully that changes. And that's going to be the hope, and that'll be the hope starting next Saturday when they return home to take on Pittsburgh. But if it doesn't, not going to be surprised at all. And no matter what, we'll still be here covering and talking about this team on a nightly basis. That is going to wrap up this edition of the podcast, guys. In the meantime, feel free to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. That recap article will be posted here momentarily. Go back if you want to torture yourself and read more about Carolina's blowout defeat to Duke. You can do so. A big day for Carolina football on the recruiting trail. 2 more commits to Bill Belichick and his staff in future classes. Anthony has you covered on that front. So make sure you visit our website every single day. That's HeelToughBlog.com for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Carolina has a week off, but that does not mean that we have a week off. I've already got the first show planned for next week. We'll be back here on Monday night. Whether we do it live or not is to be determined. But we'll be back on Monday with the state of the program. A lot of audio from a lot of interesting figures in the local and college basketball media. And we're going to talk about just where Carolina basketball is and where they move forward after tonight. We're going to go try to get some great guests on. I think Ashton will be back for his analysis as well. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of our content throughout the remainder of the basketball season.
By the way, before we go, we got to shout out these people that were commenting tonight, man. These people knocked it out of the park. Everybody that joined us. I mean, this is the most viewership we've ever had on a live video. So you guys, I know tonight was tough, but I'm glad that you were here with us. You were venting with us. Shout out to all those people who watched this video live because this was unbelievable.
Yeah, they gave more effort than Carolina did on the basketball court. And that's saying a lot because all you got to do is type. And typing isn't hard, but we do appreciate the love, the support. Wish it would have been under happier circumstances, but maybe down the road we'll have a much happier podcast to do, and you'll be here with us enjoying and basking in the fun that Carolina basketball is supposed to be and what Carolina basketball should be. So with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And as always, Go Tar Heels.